Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. You would be remembering that as far as the Quran is concerned, we have started off with Surah Al-Nisa. And Surah Al-Nisa, of course, is a counterpart of Surah Al-Ma'idah. I've discussed this earlier on that both these surahs, they form a pair with one another. The surahs of the Quran, they occur in pairs, and these pairs actually are complementary to one another. One thing that might be rather concise in one surah would be dealt with in detail in the other surah. Similarly, at times, a topic would be discussed with a different style of reasoning or with a different format or basis of reasoning in one surah, and its complementary surah will actually bring out another style or a different style so that the whole topic is driven home in the hearts of the people. So this complementarity of pairs in the Quran is a phenomena that is really subtle and also brings forth a lot of depth and also a lot of subtlety in the Quran. So we will start off today with Surah Nisa's verse 48, and this is the verse that you might be very well aware of. It says, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna zalika liman yasha wa man yushrik billahi faqad iftara isman azima alam tara ila allazina yuzakkuna anfusahum balillahu yuzakki man yasha wa la yuzlamuna fatila. They think that whatever their beliefs and deeds, they will necessarily go to paradise. They should know that God shall not forgive that associates be deliberately ascribed to him. However, less than this, he shall forgive according to his law any sin for whomsoever he wants. And there is no doubt that he who associates partners with God is guilty of inventing a great sin. This, of course, is in the background of the fact that the people of the book are addressed, in particular the Jews, and we know besides them the idolaters were also there, but primarily Surah Nisa is a Medinan surah, and a Medinan surah addresses the people who are found there, who are primarily the Jews and the Christians. But now a comment is made on the fact that if people deliberately associate partners with God, deliberately, intentionally, then the Almighty says that this is something which is unforgivable. And anything else lesser than this, God might forgive according to his law. But polytheism, which is of course something which God calls as iftara Allah, which means that a falsehood is concocted in his name, that God says is unforgivable. Yes, there are people who might fall into sin or who might fall into polytheism without knowing it or without fully realizing it. So this warning is not meant for them. Look at the intensity of the words, that it's the deliberate nature of polytheism, which means that I am convinced there is one God. But out of arrogance, I say no. Because of my beliefs or because of the fact that my forefathers have been worshipping more than one God, I am not going to budge. So it is here that the wrath of God really gets active, and he shows this anger on people who deliberately associate partners with God. One thing that you might be knowing, and we have discussed this earlier also, I'd just like to redo it, that as far as the Jews and the Christians of the prophetic times are concerned, we know that the Jews regarded Ezra to be the son of God, and of course the Christians regarded Jesus to be the son of God, and the case of the Christians is still the same. But the Jews of Arabia were the only people who regarded Ezra to be the son of God, not other Jews outside of Arabia. So people who are primarily monotheists, like the Jews and the Christians, but they get incriminated with various forms of polytheism, but they still think that they are actually worshipping one God. About them, the Almighty says that they are still monotheists, because now it's not that they are deliberately or intentionally saying that we worship multiple gods. They might end up doing something similar, but in their own mind they have a different interpretation. So like, for example, the Holy Trinity. So Christianity, if you look at Holy Trinity, you'll seldom find a verse in the Bible that supports Trinity, and if it does, of course there are some verses that have been misinterpreted, and primarily it is something which Jesus never taught. So the Quran says at the claim of the Christians that God is, as the Quran says, Inna Allah salisu salasa. These are people who regard God to be the third in one, or the one in three. So God says that this is laqad kafara allazina qalu inna Allahu wal masih, that those who regarded Jesus to be the Son of God, they indeed committed disbelief. So this is regarded as disbelief, and people who would deliberately do so are regarded disbelievers. But not at one instance in the Quran, not at a single instance in the Quran have the Jews and the Christians of those times, in spite of being incriminated with very heinous forms of polytheism, have been called polytheists. Only the Bani Ismail, only the Ishmaelites who resided in Mecca, who actually deliberately, intentionally, and of course openly said that we worship more than one God, they were regarded as polytheists, but never the Jews and the Christians. So that is why that the Quran upholds them as a series of monotheistic tradition. Of course, the Abrahamic faiths, as we call them, they are primarily monotheists, and that is precisely what the Almighty has once said in the Quran also, that if you call them to yourself to come to a common ground, then that common ground is monotheism. So ta'alaw ila kalimatin sawa'in baynana wa baynakum, that famous verse, that if we have differences with one another, okay, let's come to the common point. So that verse also shows that both the Jews and the Christians, in spite of being involved in some blatant forms of polytheism, because they did not profess it intentionally, or did not claim to be polytheists, they are not called polytheists in any way. So they are basically upholders of the monotheistic tradition. But here the Quran is telling us that people who deliberately insist on polytheism, then this is something which is unforgivable, and God is going to take them to task, and they will end up in eternal hell. And then continuing with this, it says, Alam tara ila allazina yuzakkuna anfusahum balillahu yuzakki man yasha wa la yuzlamuna fatila. Have you not seen those who commit as grave a sin as polytheism, and in spite of it regard themselves to be pure? Certainly not. It is in fact only God who, according to His law, grants purity to whomsoever He wills. So people in the times of the Prophet who would regard themselves to be pure, thinking that they are the chosen ones of God, and they still commit polytheism, the Almighty says that such people, about them, there is absolutely there are no two opinions, that they are individuals who have gone astray. And then the Quran says, Unzur kaifa. So the words are, Unzur kaifa yaftarun ala Allahi al-kazib wa kafa bihi isman mubina. So they shall definitely suffer the punishment of their misdeeds, and shall not face injustice the slightest. And look at them now, through these claims of theirs, they are inventing falsehoods against God, and in reality, this in itself is a blatant sin. So if you look at the Quran, you will find that it is evident that even in the case of other sins, a person should not become bold and rash, because they too will be forgiven if God intends. And these people had actually erroneously reckoned that since they are the progeny of near ones of God and their chosen people, hence in spite of being inflicted by grave sins, they still have the purity needed to enter paradise. So obviously the Jews regarded themselves to be the chosen ones, and God tells them that if they claim to be pure simply because they think that they are the near ones of God, they are the progeny of the near ones of God, then this is not standard enough to let them into paradise. And the law referred to here is that purity relates to faiths and deeds, virtue and piety. And God grants the gift of purity to only those who diligently adopt these things, and without these, no one can attain it. So, as you can see, that the Quran is absolutely strict here, that any self-claim to piety or any self-claim to be pure individuals is not going to in any way stake that claim. Unzur kayfa yaftarun ala Allahi al-kazib. Look at them, how these people, how through these claims of theirs, they are inventing falsehoods against God, and in reality, this in itself is enough to be a blatant sin. So, amongst the various forms of polytheism which was found in amongst the idolaters and the people of the book, this distinction has to be made, that whilst the polytheists of Mecca, the Bani Ismail, the family of the Quraysh, the Meccans, they openly professed to polytheism. They said, yes, God is the creator, but they regarded the angels to be daughters of God, and hence they subscribe to this polytheistic tradition, much like the Hindus of today. But the monotheistic tradition, which was upheld by the Jews and Christians, in spite of being incriminated, as I said earlier, with forms of polytheism, after all, regarding Jesus to be the Son of God and Ezra to be the Son of God, is nothing but polytheism. But they were not regarded as polytheistic because they were trying to interpret polytheism in a form of monotheism. So they themselves claimed to be monotheists. Of course, they were deviant monotheists. So at best, what the Quran did call them was that they were deviant monotheists, but still, nevertheless, they were monotheists. أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا نَصِيبًا مِنَ الْكِتَابِ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْجِبْتِ وَالطَّاغُوتِ وَيَقُولُونَ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا هَؤُلَاءِ أَهْدَى مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا سَبِيلًا أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ لَعَنَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَمَن يَلْعَنِ اللَّهُ فَلَن تَجِدَ لَهُ نَصِيرًا. Have you not seen the people who were given God's book? They believe in Jibt and Taghut, and say of the disbelievers, they are better guided than the believers. It is these very people on whom God has laid his curse. And those who are cursed by God, you can find none to help them. So this is one example of the various forms of polytheism that was rampant amongst the Jews. I mean, we just saw one of them was that they regarded Ezra to be the son of God. So the word Jibt, if you look at the word Jibt here, it actually refers to occult disciplines. So these occult disciplines like witchery, witchcraft and sorcery. So in these occult disciplines, satanic powers are considered to have an absolute authority to cause harm or benefit. Jibt is mentioned alongside a Taghut, and there is no difference between a Taghut and Satan. So Taghut is another name of Satan. So in the Quran, both these words are used synonymously. So what is being said is that they believe in Jibt and they believe in Taghut, which means that they have faith in these occult disciplines like magic and sorcery and witchcraft and wizardry, etc. And also they have faith, they believe in Satan. In other words, they have a very strong connection with Satan. And then more than that, they regard the disbelievers, of course, what is being implied here are the polytheists. So they regard the polytheists to be better than the believers themselves. So we know that from the monotheistic tradition or the tradition of being the people of the book, they would have welcomed the Prophet, and they would have welcomed the Quran because of the prediction of their arrival is mentioned as a prophecy in their own scriptures. But not only they did not do this, they in fact openly regarded the polytheists to have a better start. They regarded them to be better than the believers, and that is why the Quran says that look how foolish they are in this regard. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ لَعَنَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَمَن يَلْعَنِ اللَّهُ فَلَن تَجِدَ لَهُ نَصِيرًا. It is these people on whom God has laid his curse, and those who are cursed by God, you can find none to help them. أَمْ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّنَ الْمُلْكِ فَإِذًا لَا يُؤْتُونَ النَّاسَ نَقِيرًا. Do they have a share in God's kingdom? If this was so, they would not have been prepared to give them a useless penny, give even a useless penny to people. لَا يُؤْتُونَ النَّاسَ نَقِيرًا. So we have discussed this earlier on, of course, in Surah Baqarah. It's become very evident that the Jews had, of the times of the Prophet, of course, they had this very strong inclination or a very strong sentiment against the Ishmaelites because they thought that why was the last prophet sent to them? They regarded the last prophet to be from among themselves, and they wanted that last prophet should rise from amongst themselves. But when, of course, he was sent amongst the Ishmaelites, this made them even more jealous, and the Quran says that this jealousy is something which made them deny Prophet Muhammad. And the words that we found in Surah Baqarah earlier on were hasadan min indi anfusihim. It was because of their jealousy that they refused to accept someone outside of their clan, someone outside of their lineage to be a prophet of God, especially when he was supposed to be the last messenger. One thing, my dear viewers, you might need to continuously note when we study these Medinan surahs is that there's a supreme distinction that has to be made between the Jews and the Christians of the times of the Prophet Muhammad and the Jews and the Christians that we find ourselves around them today. The people who are living in the Western countries, they must not regard these verses of which address the Jews and the Christians in the Quran as the same Jews and the Christians that they found around them. And we have discussed this reason a number of times because in the times of the prophets of God, especially in the case of the last messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, The truth is delivered to the addressees in its ultimate form, and no other than the messenger of God himself does this. And when he does this, then of course they are the person or the people to whom this truth is presented, they are left with no excuse except stubbornness to deny it. So for them, the Almighty says they are punished in this world because of this deliberate denial, because of this obstinate denial. But of course, this is something that is specific to the era of God's messenger, which we call the prophetic era. In the post-prophetic era, the era that we are living in, of course, we are not in a position to deliver the truth to our brethren, to other religions, in the same way which a messenger of God can. And nor can we pinpoint people who have deliberately denied the truth, because that is something which is God's prerogative. In the times of God's messengers, it was God himself who conveyed to his messenger through Wahi who and which were the groups that were intentionally denying, and thence they were actually put to task or taken to task. But in this era, of the post-prophetic era, in which neither there is a prophet of God, nor can we be sure that any non-Muslim is deliberately denying. So the label of the word kafir cannot be put on them in any case. So a kafir is a person who intentionally denies the truth. So this is something that has to be kept in mind. That whenever you read the Quran, especially these Medinan surahs, the stern and the harsh verses which relate to the Jews and Christians, they actually relate to those Jews and Christians and not of today. Today's Jews and Christians, of course, they might be ignorant of religion, they might be ignorant of their own religion, and they might be ignorant of Islam, and at the same time, they might have an excuse not to accept or come near Islam for various reasons, one being what Muslims themselves do, and the other being that, of course, a whole, I would say, a storm of atheism has engulfed everyone. And of course, this cannot be regarded as an excuse enough not to find out the truth. But the thing is that as far as we human beings are concerned, we cannot in any way be stern to them. So all that we need to tell them is that they should be sincere seekers of the truth, and they should critically evaluate the truth. And if they don't do so, then whether they are Muslims or Christians or they belong to any denomination, then they will be taken to task, because the search for the truth is what God has actually made us responsible of. That responsibility is something that we can never shirk. So, am lahum nasibu min al-mulki fa izillah yu'tun an-nasa naqira. So, do they have a share in God's kingdom? Of course, implying the fact that when they claim that the Ishmaelites should not be the recipients of the final prophet, and it should be they themselves who should be this recipient, then God has made this very plain statement in a very harsh and stern way, that do they think that they have a share in the kingdom of God, so that they think that they should be the ones to whom the prophet should be sent? Am yahsudun an-nasa ala ma atahum Allahu min fadlihi faqad atayna ala Ibrahim al-kitaba wal hikma wa ataynahum mulkan azima. So now it is something of a very stern nature once again being spelled out to them. Are they envying people, or are they being jealous of people on what God has blessed them with? If this is true, then they should listen. We gave this branch of Abraham's descendants our Sharia and Hikmah, and have blessed them with an illustrious kingdom. So we have discussed this earlier on as well, that as far as the progeny of Abraham is concerned, it were the Israelites who were given this responsibility, this task of spreading the message of God in the first instance, and this went out for almost 2,000 years. But when they proved unworthy of this responsibility, and in the final phases, they were even after the life of the last Israelite prophet, who was Jesus, so they were finally deposed from this position. And later on, this position was given to Prophet Muhammad's followers, who of course belong to the Ishmaelites. So it is here that it is being said that do they think that they have a share in God's kingdom, so that it should be they who should be blessed with the last messenger of God? No, it's not the case. So the Almighty says rather emphatically that it is me who's going to decide who this position of delivering the truth is now going to go to, since you have proven unworthy of it. So now this is being transferred to the other branch of Abraham's progeny, who are the Ishmaelites. And obviously, after Prophet Ishmael, the only messenger to come in that lineage was Prophet Muhammad, after about 2,500 years. And so once This deposition had taken place. The Almighty announced it in a rather emphatic way, as I just said. فَقَدْ آتَيْنَا عَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ الْكِتَابَ. Now we have given this responsibility to the other branch of Abraham's progeny, which are the Ishmaelites. And the word al-kitab and al-hikmah, we have also discussed them previously, that they refer to law and wisdom. So the word al-kitab, although we know that one of its connotations is a book, that is more of its Urdu connotation maybe, but in the Arabic language it has many meanings, and one of them is law. So al-kitab and ash-sharia, they are often used synonymously in the Quran, as is the case here, and al-hikmah refers to wisdom. So al-kitab and al-hikmah, whenever they occur together, whenever they are juxtaposed together, they refer to the contents of religion. Al-Kitab refers to the Sharia, and the Sharia, of course, is the law that is, we call the divine law that has been given by the Almighty. And Al-Hikmah actually envelops wisdom, which means faith and morality. So Al-Hikmah encompasses the articles of faith and the articles of morality. So together with the articles of faith and morality, which form Hikmah, and Sharia, which is the law, this is what the complete content of religion has always been. In the case of the Quran especially. So وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَظِيمًا again refers to this very prominent announcement made by the Almighty, that now this shall be transferred to the Ishmaelites. And then it is said, فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ آمَنَ بِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ صَدَّ عَنْهُ وَكَفَى بِجَهَنَّمَ سَعِيرًا إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا سَوْفَ نُصْلِيهِمْ نَارًا كلما نضجت جلودهم بدلناهم جلودا غيرها ليذوقوا العذاب إن الله كان عزيزا حكيما. Okay, before I go on, I'll just take a pause here, and if you have any questions regarding verse 48, from verses 48 to 54, please raise them, and then inshallah we'll continue with the discourse.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The first question is specific to verse 48, and it asks, is it deliberate adoption of polytheism, or to adopt polytheism as primary belief in contrast to monotheism?
Verse 48, it says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ. Is that the verse referring to? Yes, that is what I just explained. That it is not that this adoption is made out of any confusion or out of any like any misinformation. It's like a deliberate ascription to God. So this in Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka is referring to the fact that people, they know that there is one God, but in spite of this knowledge and acknowledgement, they still stick to their polytheistic practices because they think that this is what they have inherited from their forefathers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question, this is a big one. So this is in regards to verse 54. And we know from your previous classes that when Muslims have to decide a ruler, Islam discourages dynastic ruling and encourages democracy. So in verse 54, Allah mentions His favor on the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam, in the form of bestowing him with al-kitab, al-hikmah, and great kingdomship. Here, Allah declares mulukiyat or kingdomship as a great favor of Allah. If you could please clarify, why is this? Not trying to defend anything.
So basically, it's not a question of defending anything. The fact that the democracy was proposed as a model for people is something that took place in the times of Prophet Muhammad. Previously, we had a tribal system, and there were tribes who lived separately. There were tribal elders, and they were given various responsibilities. So this is in no way a contradiction to the fact that God is promoting dynastic politics or dynasties or monarchies. You see, if you look at the law that what was ascribed to the progeny of Abraham, so this progeny of Abraham is a very special progeny. So Abraham was given a few tasks, and he was given this responsibility that two of his descendants would be given the position of Shahada, which means that they will deliver the truth to other nations of the world. So the Israelites, amongst the Israelites, this was one nation. This was one whole nation, and it spanned about 2,000 years in which it at times did discharge its responsibility of delivering the truth to other nations, but in most cases it did not. So this position of Shahada or to the progeny of Abraham was given because of a certain, as I said, a certain law that if they would adhere to justice and truth, then they will become leaders of mankind in the sense that they will deliver religion to other people. So this is being spoken of as the religious leadership of mankind. So amongst that religious leadership, of course, we have political leadership, which of course arises. So in the times of Prophet Muhammad, we know that this rural and the tribal, I would say, setup was being transformed into an urban setup, and slowly and gradually this was happening. So it was now that the directive of Amruhum Shura Bainahum was given. Earlier on, whatever was given, as I said, as a religious leadership of nations to people, and as such, they were religious leaders. I mean, they were given the task of spreading religion, and that's an entirely different, I would say, track. This track in which you have to appoint a ruler and then to proceed in the form of a proper government, as I said, never existed before Prophet Muhammad's times. The territories were divided into various tribes, and the tribal elders held that position. They were the heads, and they would be appointed on various bases. It could be at times the son of a tribal elder, or it could be any other reason. But the case was that in the tribal system, this could not be been possible because tribes behave in their own way. It was in the times of Prophet Muhammad that this actually took place.
So the next question asks, Islamic theology, shirk refers to the act of attributing divine qualities or worship to anything other than Allah. And in those verses, polytheism, idolatry, associating partners with God is a sin which is unforgivable. But obviously, Allah does not need our acts to sustain His supremacy, and definitely
Right.
the shirk must affect human attitudes and behaviors in one's individual level and at the collective level that results in failure in the tests and trials of the worldly life. So what were the attitudes and behaviors of the addressees of the Prophet at the time that emanated from them being indulged in shirk, and what could be mended through cleansing them from the shirk?
I think I just explained that. This is, of course, a very fundamental question, and it really it strikes us in the mind that what exactly went wrong when the Prophet of God was there for them to explain to them that why are they associating partners with God. And God has repeatedly said this in this discourse a number of times, that if I had partners, I would have been the first one to disclose this to you. And in the absence of any such information given to you from me, it only means that you are making it up yourself. It's like concocting something. And of course, God doesn't need He doesn't need to be in any form in the sense that He would gain something or He would lose something if we start worshipping someone else. No, it is something which is below our own dignity and integrity. So the punishment, which is actually the result of denying the oneness of God, is because of the fact that we are disposed to a certain lie. We have no basis for doing something as heinous as regarding partners with God. So the Quran, if you look at the Quran, repeatedly it asks its addressees that, where have you come up with this doctrine? From where have you regarded angels to be the daughters of God? From where have you regarded Jesus to be the Son of God? What is the proof for that? Have I sent down some proof for that? So in the absence of any such proof, you are doing something which is totally baseless and it is just made up. And when you do this, you actually associate yourselves to more than one God, and then when that happens, then your own system goes topsy-turvy, and as far as your attachment to a single God is concerned, that is severely compromised. And that is something which is, of course, below our integrity and dignity, especially when we have no proof of that. I mean, had we had any proof of that, there could have been some basis. But in the absence of any proof, because you see, every time shirk is mentioned or polytheism mentioned, the Quran has these words to say, "Fa'tu," bring some proof if you have. Is there any burhan that you have? Burhan, of course, means a strong argument. Bring that and we'll see that. But the proponents of polytheism in the times of Prophet Muhammad, even today, they cannot bring any proof of the fact that God Himself has sanctioned polytheism. So you see, the proof was that bring a verse of the Quran or bring something which tells us that it is God who has said that I have some partners, and you need to, just as you need to be obedient to me, you have to be obedient to others as well. So that is what had happened for a very long time in the times of Prophet Muhammad and prior to him. So remember, this started off with monotheism. Abraham, when he built the Holy Kaaba or reconstructed it, for a long time they remained on monotheism, and it was only maybe a couple of hundred years before the arrival of Prophet Muhammad, or maybe a little more, in which this polytheism thing started in Arabia, and people brought various idols and statues and they placed them in the Holy Kaaba, and then all of a sudden these things started to appear. So this has a whole history, and to break this history, to break this, as you said, the tide that of polytheism, the last prophet, the last messenger was sent, and he was actually he spent a very better part of his life amongst the Ishmaelites, the Meccans, and he tried to tell them that whatever they are doing is something that needs to be reevaluated. For 13 long years he was amongst them. He tried to answer all sorts of polytheistic practices that they had. He confronted them. Initially he tried to convince them in a very affectionate way, but as things escalated, and Almighty also told him that now they are denying out of their own arrogance, then they were also sternly addressed. But you see, this whole 13-year-old history did not yield anything, and that is what had happened, and that is why when the Almighty took them to task, he said that, well, if now in this situation that 13 years have passed and everything that could have been done to convince you, and you are convinced from your inside that this is something that is absolutely true, but out of jealousy, out of arrogance, out of the fact that you think that your own forefathers were doing something and you could not go against it, you are still sticking to a unsubstantiated belief. So we have to understand this. If we don't understand this cultural milieu, this background of Arabia, we would continue to think that why is it that God becomes so angry every now and then with the polytheists.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the questions regarding what we so far.
So, فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ آمَنَ بِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ صَدَّ عَنْهُ وَكَفَى بِجَهَنَّمَ سَعِيرًا. But alas, they have yet to duly honor and value it. So, there are those among them also who have professed faith in this Sharia and this Hikmah, and those also who have turned away from this. Sufficient is the furious fire of hell for such people. So now the Quran takes a step ahead and tells us that in spite of those who denied Prophet Muhammad, there are still others who did accept him. So amongst the people of the book, amongst them, we know that there were two distinct categories. A small category, or a category of people of the book who were not in very large numbers. They did profess faith in Prophet Muhammad because they were true people of the book. They were waiting for a prophet of God, and the Quran has praised them at various instances that these are the people who, as soon as they saw the prophet and they said, well, this is the person that we were waiting for because he's mentioned by name in our scriptures, etc., they professed faith in him. But a very large part did not, and this we know from other parts of the Quran. And here it is said that this is the case, that when people do so, then this deliberate denial has no let off, and the hereafter they will be punished really badly. And إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِآيَاتِنَا سَوْفَ نُصْلِيهِمْ نَارًا كُلَّمَا نَضِجَتْ جُلُودُهُمْ بَدَّلْنَاهُمْ جُلُودًا غَيْرَهَا لِيَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا. Now this is a very, very harsh verse of the Quran, and it really it's like God seething with anger. And it says that those who have denied our revelations, we shall soon cast them into a great fire. No sooner will their skins be consumed than we shall give them other skins, so that they may fully taste the torment. Indeed, God is mighty and wise. So again, this deliberate denial on the part of the people is actually something that makes them worthy of such a heinous punishment. And the Quran has said that they will burn the fire of hell, their skins will be scorched, they will be totally consumed by that fire. And because their punishment is going to continue, the Almighty says that a new set of skins will be given to them. And then, of course, they will also be totally extinguished, and they will be totally consumed by the fire. And this process will continue because of this attitude of deliberate denial. And of course, this is something that has to be paid heed to, that eternal damnation or eternal hell for something that we do on the basis of deliberate and intentional arrogance, and something that we very well know is not true, and we still stick to it, is something which, which really it takes its toll. And I think as human beings, we too would never condone actions of people who accept the truth and then out of their own sheer arrogance or jealousy or whatever the reason be, they still say that we will not accept the truth. So that is what makes God angry as well. When you intentionally ward off, when you intentionally counter, and then when you intentionally become rivals of the truth about which you are convinced that yes, it is true. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَنُدْخِلُهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا لَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ وَنُدْخِلُهُمْ ظِلًّا ظَلِيلًا. So now this is often the case in the Quran that whenever the fate of the disbelievers is mentioned, parallel to it, the fate of the believers is also mentioned, as is the case here. So it says, and those who profess faith in our revelations and did pious deeds, we shall soon reward them. And of course, that reward is mentioned right after that by saying that we shall admit them into orchards below which streams flow, and they shall abide therein forever. There they shall have for them chaste wives, and we shall keep them in a thick shade. Lahum fiha azwajum mutahharatun, of course, means that they have wives for them there as well, and they will stay there forever. This is the reward of being righteous individuals. This is a reward for them that they actually were in this position, that in spite of having the freedom of expression, in spite of having the freedom to do whatever they would like, they still chose the path of righteousness, and this is the reward of righteousness. And then إن الله يأمركم أن تؤدوا الأمانات إلى أهلها وإذا حكمتم بين الناس أن تحكموا بالعدل إن الله نعم ما يعظكم به إن الله كان سميعا بصيرا. Believers, God has decided to grant you a great kingdom. So at this instance, God directs you to hand over your trusts, to hand over the trust to their rightful owners, and when you judge between people, be fair. This is a very good thing which God counsels you about. Indeed, God hears all and sees all. So once again, as at this juncture, when the whole transfer of power was taking place and the Bani Ismail were given now this new responsibility of delivering the truth through other people, they are being told that now at this instance you are required to hand back the trusts to people who are worthy of them, to their rightful owners, which means that a system of merit must be always in place for you. And when you judge between people, وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ, it has to be through justice. So this justice is a queen of all virtues, as Socrates has also said, that it is something which stands at the pinnacle of all moral values. You have to be just. And this justice is not just related to court justice. It actually refers to justice at every level. It also refers to social justice. It refers to a system of merit. It refers to justice in our relationships. So all these relationships that we have between our brothers, sisters, and our uncles and aunts and parents and siblings and children, etc., all these are, they stand at a very, very precarious hook, and that is something that we have to always maintain, that balance, and that very, very important temperament in which any injustice should not be tolerated. And God says, in Allah ni'ma ya'izukum bihi, this is a very good thing which He counsels you, and He hears all and He listens to all, and He sees all. And then, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu atiyu Allah wa atiyu rasula wa ulil amri minkum fa in tanaza'tum fi shay'in farudduhu ila Allahi wa rasul in kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal yawmil akhir ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَحْسَنُ تَأْوِيلًا. Believers, this is the kingdom of God. In it, obey God and obey His messenger, and also those among you who are made responsible for affairs. Then if there is a difference of opinion between you in some matter, refer it to God and His messenger for judgment, if you believe in God and in the last day. This is better and more seemly as regards the consequence. So now at this juncture also, when the Bani Ismail or the Ishmaelites were being handed the reins of rulership, of governance, they are being told that this is what your agenda, your motto should be, that you have to obey God and His messenger, who at that time, of course, was standing right there in front of them. And obviously the nature of this directive is such that it will continue after as well, once they pass away, when the Prophet passes away. So God and His messenger, they have to obey it in all matters. And the very important thing that is mentioned in a very subtle way is to obey those in authority, ulul amr minkum, which actually refers to the fact that a disciplined system has been given. Now, as citizens of state, you have to obey your rulers, you cannot break laws, you have to abide by the laws, and of course this doesn't mean that you cannot differ with the laws. In all such setups which Islam envisages, of course, a democratic setup that has been discussed elsewhere, it does not in any way go against what is said here. So you have to obey your rulers as long as, of course, whatever they have presented before you is something that has been passed by a legislature, by a parliament, and of course, if that is the case, then you have to abide by the laws, even if you differ with them. But if you differ with them, you still have the chance to express your difference of opinion. You can have the laws changed whenever the time comes. You can change the government as well, the people who rule by a majority vote. But that is something that has to be understood, that as far and whenever they are your rulers, and as far as they are rulers, in no way can you be treacherous, in no way can you act as traitors, and in no way can you overrule the system of law that has been implemented. So in other words, obeying rules and laws in the Quran is not just a civic duty, it becomes a religious duty as well. So abiding by the law of the land is like following the Sharia itself, because a disciplined lot, a lot which is given to discipline and order and organization, is something which our religion wants, and it wants to progress in the form of people who always respect one another, at the same time respect the laws of their country. So with this we come to an end to today's lesson here, and if you have any questions, please raise them about the overall set of verses that we have discussed. Otherwise, we'll start off with the idiomatic translation of these verses.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The first question is asking, in verse 57, Allah gives glad tidings of paradise by saying that they're going to have azwajin mutahhara, but it's understood that this would be granted to anyone who does good deeds, whether it's a man or woman. So why specifically mention azwajin mutahhara and not, something that's more inclusive for both men and women?
Well, this is a style of the Quran, and it is a style of Semitic literature. If you look at the literature, that men are generally mentioned, and it's not that women are not included. It's just that they are mentioned in a sense that the society that the Quran had come into, and of course the previous scriptures, was a patriarchal society, and women were not expressed in a way that we express about them today. So today, of course, had the Quran been revealed, in that case, we might have a different diction of the Quran. So remember, there is a diction that is always governed by the tide of time, by as they say, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age. And that spirit of the age at those times was that this was basically women were kept protected, and they would not be spoken of in such blatant words. So that is why the Quran has used women in a rather concealed way. But whenever it says lahum fiha azwajun mutahharatun, that men will have women, it always is implied that women will also have men that they choose. So it's just a question of implicit statement. And also let me tell you this, that there are other places in the Quran in which this implicit statement has become explicit. For example, I think it's in Surah Ahzab, it says at-tayyibatu lit-tayyibin wal-khabisatu lil-khabisin, which means that men who are pious will be placed with women who are pious, and men who are evil will be placed and paired with women who are evil. So on certain occasions, this implicit mention is also brought out, but on all other cases or all other instances in which this mention is rather implicit, you have to understand the style, and then it will not become difficult for you to surmise that both men and women are implied actually.
Very much. The next question refers to what you had said in the past in regards to your answer about shirk, and they're trying to understand what is like bad that shirk brings within humans that is so detrimental and unforgivable.
For this, you all just need to study the history of polytheism, and you'll see that because of the fact that it is not grounded on the truth, so it raises people to another level of falsehood, falsity, false hopes, superstition, and at the same time, doing things which are absolutely unbecoming. So people become superstitious, they become oblivious of their hereafter. They would like to know that what should be the road map to success. So all these things, they become wayward for them. For such people, they have a different worldview entirely, And to sum it up, I think one thing is sufficient to tell them, that they never hold on to the truth the way it should be held on to, on the basis of arguments and reasoning. You see, the biggest objection which God has raised against polytheism is that what is the basis? You should believe in things on the basis of an argument. If you're not believing in things on the basis of reasoning, then you are following all kinds of conjecture. And this is going to affect all other parts and spheres of life. You will never ever give importance to arguments. And when I say argument, I mean proofs and reasoning. So reasoning and intellect will never be a part of your life. You'll be like a person who is driven by emotions, a person who has not used his senses. So because the Almighty continues to say that polytheism and shirk is something which has no proof, it has no basis. So if you don't have a basis of something, then this is bound to enter other parts of your life as well. You'll start believing in things, you'll start doing things which have no basis. Because now it's your emotions, or maybe your self-driven ego, or the fact that you did something because your parents were doing them. And the truth will have no value for you. Whether you should be a seeker, remember the greatest responsibility that we have as believers is to seek the truth, not just believers but as human beings, to find out the truth and to stick by the truth. So this basic responsibility would be sacrificed. We would infringe upon this. So that is why it is important that we must value the truth, because if we don't do so, then we'll become a bunch of animals.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, what if the law of the land is against your religion? For example, if you work in U.S. military that is bombing Muslim nations, as you said that you have to obey the law of the land, what do you do in those situations?
Right. Okay, in such a situation, if you think that if you're in the U.S. Army and the U.S. Army is doing something which is against morality or against what you believe, obviously you have the chance, you have this, when you entered the army, you should have known that this could be an outcome. And if this could be an outcome, then you should have decided that if ever this takes place, that I'm just going to resign or accept being court-martialed or whatever, and not go by what they do, because I would not side by them. So, this is a decision that should have made when you enter the U.S. Army, that if I face such a situation in which I'm asked to do something which is against my conscience and morality, then I'm just going to withhold, and I'm going to just withdraw from that. And if I suffer any consequences, I'll bear that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, is atheism also considered a form of shirk?
I don't think so. That's an entirely different thing. So atheism is like something that you say that there is no God. You don't believe in any God. So shirk or polytheism is something in which you believe at least in God and say, well, he has partners. So these are different doctrines.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I'm not sure if you're going to cover this in idiomatic translation, but I wanted to ask you, what does na'imma ya'idukum means?
Ni'ma means that this is something good for you, and ya'izukum means that God advises this to you. Ya'izukum, so wa'aza ya'izu means that he counsels this to you. The fact that you have to return the trusts to their rightful owners is something that is befitting for you to do, and this is what God advises you to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the questions.
Okay, so now I start with the literal and idiomatic translation of these verses. For those of you who might be joining us today, or maybe they have joined us in the recent past, I would like to reiterate that after we finished an explanation of these verses, we undertake a literal and idiomatic translation of these verses so that you come closer to the words, and at the same time, if you note down this vocabulary, it becomes a way for you very soon, inshallah, as you go along the Quran, that you'll be able to understand the Quran to some extent through its vocabulary without even knowing Arabic, by just being used to these words and their connotations and their constructions. So that is why we do this literal and, of course, the accompanied idiomatic translation. So, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi, we start off with this. Inna, indeed. Allah, God. La, not. Yaghfiru, forgive. An, that. Yushraka bihi, partners be associated with him. So, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushraka bihi would mean, indeed God will not forgive that partners be associated with him. Wa and yaghfiru will forgive, ma duna zalika, whatever is less than this, liman yasha'u, for whomsoever He wills. So, God will not forgive that partners be associated with Him, but He can forgive anything which is less than this for whomsoever whomsoever He wishes. But of course, this is something that we always know, that when God says liman yasha, it doesn't mean that this will be something out of it would be a haphazard thing. He would forgive people on the basis of His own law. And liman yasha only mentions that when if He does so, no one is going to be able to stop Him, because He is someone who can implement His will. It should not in any case give you the impression that God does what He wants to. It only means that when He decides to do something according to the justice and law, no one is able to stop Him. وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ افْتَرَى إِثْمًا عَظِيمًا. Wa, and man, he, yushrik billah, associates partners with God. Faqad, therefore he, iftara, concocts a lie. In fact, you can just write iftara means concocts. Isman, a sin. Azima, great. So he who associates partners with God, then he actually concocts a great sin. Then he makes up a great sin, which means that he is someone who is inventing a great sin. He is doing a great sin. Alam tara ila allazina yuzakkuna anfusahum. Alam tara, is lam, not tara, you see, ila, towards, allazina, those who. So do you not see those who yuzakkuna, regard themselves, regard pure, anfusahum, themselves. So do you not see those who regard themselves to be pure? Bal, in fact, Allah, God, yuzakki, makes pure, man yashahu, who He wants to, wa, and la, not, yuzlamuna, being oppressed, fatila, the slightest. Balillahu yuzakki man yasha would mean, in fact, God purifies whomsoever He wants to, wala yuzlamuna fatila, and not the slightest zulm, not the slightest oppression comes to a person. So, unzur kaifa yaftaruna ala Allahil kazib. Unzur, look. Kaifa, how. Yaftaruna, fabricates. Allah, on. Allah, God. Al kazib, falsehood. So look at them. Unzur, look at them, how they concoct, they fabricate a lie on God. Of course, that is something that we have just discussed, that shirk is something which is a concoction, it is a fabrication against God. وَكَفَى بِهِ إِثْمًا مُبِينًا. Wa, and, kafa, sufficient. Bihi, for it. Isman means sin, and mubina, which is very clear. A sin which is very blatant, a sin which is very clear, which means that this in itself, وَكَفَى بِهِ, this in itself is sufficient to be a blatant sin, which means that when you ascribe partners to God without any reason, then this is a blatant sin. Alam tara ila allazina yuzakkuna, alam tara ila allazina utu nasiba min al-kitab yu'minuna bil jibti wat taghut. Alam tara is the same construction that we just saw. So do you not see, ila allazina, ila, towards, allazina, those who, do you not see those who, utu, given, nasiba min al-kitab, the book. So this is like a compound word. Yu'minuna bil jibt, they believe in al-jibt. So jibt we just talked about, it refers to occult disciplines like witchcraft and sorcery. So do you not see at those who were given the book, they had faith in jibt, which is sorcery, and taghut, which is Satan. Wa, and yaquluna, they say, lillazina, regarding those, kafaru, who committed disbelief, haulai ahda, that these people, ahda, more guided, minallazina, from those who amanu, who have professed faith, sabil, the way. So they are more guided in their ways than the believers themselves. So what is being said here is that do you not look at those people who were given the book, of course referring to the people of the book, they believe in jibt and in taghut, jibt of course occult disciplines, and in Satan, and they would say regarding the disbelievers that they are more guided, haulai ahda, more guided than the believers as far as the way is concerned. So sabil means way. Ulaika, they, allazina, who, la'anahumullah, God has cursed. So they are the ones whom God has cursed. Wa, and, man, he, yal'anillahu, he who is cursed by God, or he who God curses. Man yal'anillahu would mean that he who has been cursed by God. That would mean that وَفَلَن تَجِدَ لَهُ نَصِيرًا. Fa, therefore, lan, certainly not. Tajida, will find, you will find lahu, for him, nasira, a helper. So he who has been cursed by God, waman, he who, yal'anillahu, cursed by God, falan tajida lahu nasira, you will not find any helper for him. Such a person who is cursed by God is not going to be helped by anyone. So nasira, helper. Or in fact, it means help. You'll not find any help for him, or no person to help. So nasira is someone who helps, and nasira, as it is stated here, would mean that you will not find any person to help such a person who has been cursed by God. Am lahum nasibum min al-mulk fa izan la yu'tuna an-nasa naqira. Or, so is also like a question. Is lahum, for them, nasibum min al-mulk, a share from the kingdom? Is for them a share from the kingdom, of course referring to the kingdom of God. Fa izan, then in that case, la yu'tuna nasa. La yu'tuna nasa would mean that they would not be given anything. Naqira, la yu'tuna nasa naqira, not the slightest. So do they think that they have a share in God's kingdom? That is what is implied by the word am lahum nasibum min al mulk. Do they think that they have a, so nasib means share, min al mulk, from the kingdom of God. So do they think that they have a share in God's kingdom? فَإِذَا لَا يُؤْتُونَ النَّاسَ نَقِيرًا. So in that case, يُؤْتُونَ النَّاسَ نَقِيرًا, they would not have been prepared to give them even something very ordinary. فَإِذَا لَا يُؤْتُونَ النَّاسَ نَقِيرًا. If that is the case, that they have a share, then that would have been such a thing that they would not have been prepared to give even a useless penny to people. In other words, such would be their stinginess and meanness, that if had they been granted this share, فَإِذًا لَا يُؤْتُونَ النَّاسَ نَقِيرًا, they would not have been prepared to give a single dime to a person. Am يَحْسُدُونَ النَّاسَ, or is, when all these meanings are implied, of course, because here it's a question, so are. Yahsuduna means they are jealous. An-nasa, of people. And obviously the context shows the people here refers to the Bani Ismail or the Prophet's clan. So are they jealous of these people? Are they jealous of these followers or these followers of the Prophet? Allah, on ma, that atahumullah, what God has given them. So are these people jealous because of what God has given them? Allah ma atahumullah. So faqad min fadlihi, from his blessings. Faqad, so therefore, atayna, we have. Faqad atayna, we have given. Ala Ibrahim, the progeny of Abraham. Al-Kitab, the law. Wal hikmah, and the wisdom. So if they feel that they are jealous that because of the fact that God has given them this from his blessings, then they should remember that we have given the progeny of Abraham, Al-Kitab, the Sharia or the law, and Al-Hikmah. Al-Hikmah is the wisdom. So if we have given the progeny of Abraham the law and the wisdom, and thereby what has been given to them, وَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مُلْكًا عَزِيمًا. Wa, and ataynahum, we have given them, mulkan, kingdom, azima, great, and as such we have given them a great kingdom. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ آمَنَ بِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ صَدَّ عَنْهُ وَكَفَى بِجَهَنَّمَ سَعِيرًا. Fa, therefore, minhum, among them, man, those, amana bihi, who professed faith in him, in the Prophet. Wa, and minhum, there are those among them, man, who, sadda anhu, who actually stopped from him, or who desisted, which means they just did not go ahead with that, and they just turned away. I mean, sadda anhu. And for such people, wa kafa bi jahannama sa'ira. Wa, and kafa, sufficient. Bi jahannama, hell, sa'ira, as a burning place. For such people, sufficient is the burning fire of hell. For such people, sufficient is the burning fire of hell. This is a very specific, you can say, style of the Quran in which things are mentioned in a very stern way. Kullama means every time. Nazijat, So nazjat means consume, consumed by fire. Juluduhum, their skins. So every time their skins are consumed by fire. So julud is the plural of jild, and jild of course means sin, hum means theirs. So every time their skins are consumed by fire, baddalnahum, we change them, jaludan, into skins, ghayraha, other than the ones that they had. In other words, we give them new skins. Liyazuqul azab, liyazuqu, so that they taste, al azab, punishment, so that they taste punishment. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana, is azizan, powerful, hakima, wise. So every time the fire consumes their skin, we change them with other skins. We change those skins with other skins. We give them new skins, ghayraha, other than the ones that they have. Liyazuqu, so that they taste, al-azab, the punishment. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana, is aziz, powerful, hakima, wise. Indeed, God is powerful and wise. Wa, and. Allazina, those who. Amanu, professed faith. And those who professed faith. Wa, and. Amilu salihat. Amilu means done, did. Right, salihat, righteous deeds. So those who professed faith and did righteous deeds. Sanudkhiluhum, in very soon we will admit them. Very soon we will admit them. Jannatin, in orchards. Tajri, flow, min tahtiha, below them. So we will admit them into orchards below which streams, as is the next word that tells us, below which al-anhar will be flowing. Anhar, the plural of nahar. So we will admit them into orchards below which streams would be flowing. Khalidina fiha. So khalidina means forever. Fiha, in it, which means that just as those people who are condemned, they will remain in eternal hell, so these people will remain in paradise forever, in these orchards forever. Khalidina fiha. Khalidina means eternal, forever. Fiha, in it. Abada is also eternal. So it's like a double stress. The word Khalidina and Abada both refer to eternity. So they will remain in paradise for eternity, till eternity. Lahum fiha, la, for, hum, them, fiha, in it, in these orchards. Azwaj. Azwaj is the plural of zawj. Of course, zawj means spouses. And here, of course, it refers to their wives. Mutahara means pure and chaste, which means they are very innocent, they are very chaste, and of course, they have been made for these people in a way that they'll be very comfortable with each other. Fiha azwaju mutahhara wa nudkhiluhum zillan zalila. Wa nudkhiluhum, and we shall make them enter. And we shall make them enter. Zillan. So zillan means a shade. Zalila means thick. And we shall make them enter a thick shade, of course referring to the life of paradise. And then, Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addul amanati ila ahliha. Inna, indeed, Allah, God. Indeed, God, ya'murukum, commands you. Ya'muru, commands, kum, you. Indeed, God commands you that an tu'addu, you should return al-amanat, the trusts, ila, towards ahliha, those who are its rightful owners. So indeed, God commands you to return the trusts to their rightful owners. Wa, and, iza, when, hakamtum, you decide, bainan nas, between people, baina, between, an-nas, people, and when you decide between people, an tahkumu bil adl, you should decide with justice. An, that, tahkumu, decide, bil adl, with justice. So when you decide between people, you should decide with justice. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, ni'imma, ni'imma means good. Ya'izukum, this advice that He gives you. So this is a good thing, or this is a good advice that God gives you. Inna, indeed, Allah, God, kana, is, sami'an, hearer, someone who hears, basira, who sees. So indeed, God is someone who hears and sees, who hears all and He sees all. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu atiyullaha wa atiyu rasul. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O those who believe. O those who believe. Atiyullah. Ati means obey. Allah, God. O those who believe, obey God. Wa and Atiyu Rasul, and obey the messenger. Atiyu, obey. As a Rasul, the messenger, referring to Prophet Muhammad here. Wa and Ulil Amr. Ulil Amr means those in authority. Minkum, among you. So obey those in authority among you. Fa, therefore. In tanaza'tum. In if. Tanaza'tum, you differ. Fi shay'in, about something. Fi, in. Shay'in, something. If you differ in something, if you have an argument in something, farudduhu, therefore refer that thing in which you have a difference of opinion, ilallah, towards God, wa and a Rasul, to his messenger. So if you have a difference of opinion in something, then return it to God and his messenger, which means consult God and his messenger. In kuntum, if kuntum, you are tu'minuna, believers, billahi, in God, wal yawmil akhir, and the last day. So you refer it back to God and his messenger if you are believers in God and the last day. Zalika, this, khair, is better. Wa, and more seemly. Ta'wila, as regard the result. So this is more better and more efficient as regard the result. So this brings us to an end to this idiomatic translation and literal translation also. And if you have any question that might have arisen you during this translation, you can ask them. Otherwise, we can move on to general questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our first question is asking, how do we understand the verses of Quran stating the orchards under which river or streams will flow?
Okay, so I've explained this earlier on. I mean, it does not mean that the paradise will have underwater or underground streams or canals, as has been understood in some cases. It actually, I mean, if you look at other instances in the Quran in which this is used, so this was a very commonly cherished thing amongst the Arabs, that their orchard should be on a high mountain, because that would shield it from winds and from floods. And that high mountain on which the orchard would be, of course, there would be valleys around that mountain in which water or rivers would be flowing. So this was a picture of a safe and a secure orchard that the Arabs had, that it should be on a high place, and that would actually make it secure, and the water would be flowing below it, like it would be flowing in the valleys of those mountains. So that is what is meant by orchards below which streams flow. So below, of course, does not mean underground. It just means the level. The orchard would be at a high level, and the water that normally causes floods and destruction which would be a much lower in level, and it would present a very beautiful picture of an orchard.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I had a question regarding Diladan Dalila. So, like, this thick shade, it sounds almost like an everlasting shade. Why is that a good thing?
So, of course, it's spoken of in against the in Jahannam Asa'ira. The Jahannam, of course, is something that's not going to shield people, that's not going to protect people, and it's like a open thing in which people will fall. So, against that, it is mentioned that they will not suffer any such consequences. They will be in a thick shade, which means that they'll be protected, and they'll be living a life of comfort. So that is basically what is implied. It is in contrast to the hell fire that is mentioned for the disbelievers.
Thank you very much. That was it for all the questions related to today's topic. Should we move on to the general questions?
Yes, please do.
The first question asks, there is an allegation in Ghamidi Sahib that he refuses the authentic narrations which are against his views, whereas consider even the weak narrations when they support his views. Indirectly, he wants to say that the muhaddithin had less knowledge than him when it comes to consideration of hadith. How do you answer this critique?
So I would like to present, or I would request the person to give an example, because this is just a statement, and the statement has to be supported with some example or some proof. I would like to hear that.
They are not in the Zoom right now, so I think they left at some point. So if they listen to this, well, I hope they can reach out to you with an example. The next question asks, So this is in regards to the ayah when Allah says, "Remember when your Lord said to the angels, I am going to place a successive human authority on earth." And then they asked Allah, "Will you place in it someone who will spread corruption there and shed blood while we glorify your praises and proclaim your holiness?" So Allah responded, "I know that which you don't know." So in this verse, they're asking, how did the angels know of blood when they haven't even had the knowledge of blood?
So this is because of the use of the word Khalifa by the Almighty. So the word Khalifa does not mean a successor as has been generally translated. It means someone who's given authority and charge and freedom of expression of his will. So if I have the will to do right and wrong, that is what a Khalifa means. Someone who is given the authority and the freedom to express the way he or she would like to, whether adopt the righteous path or the wrong path. So when God said that I'm going to create someone who will have these powers, that whether he would like to adopt the good or the bad, it would be up to him. So that is what the angels questioned him. That is why they questioned him, that will you create someone, if you give him the powers to do right and wrong, he might end up doing wrong things and thereby spread disorder and bloodshed. So why would you do that? And God said, I know what you do not know, which means that a greater part of them would not be of such sort. They would be good people as well. And his scheme was actually, then we see, was fulfilled later on. So the word Khalifa is the word that made the angels ask this question. And the reason that people don't actually normally get this answer is because for them the word Khalifa means a successor, as has been mostly translated by our translators in English and even in Urdu and other languages. Whereas a linguistic study of the word Khalifa tells us that it refers to a person who has the will to express whatever he or she would like to.
So they're asking, how did the angels know that blood existed in humans?
I mean, this is something because the bloodshed should not be used in the simple terms as bloodshed or blood is going to exist. It just means that they'll kill each other. So bloodshed is not a word which means that blood is being shed. It just meant that they would create disorder. And the reason that they created disorder to them would be because they would have the power to misuse their authority. So when you create someone and you give charge to that someone to do anything that he or she would like to do, whether to do right or whether to do wrong, there's always the chance that out of arrogance, out of other emotions, they will just do the opposite. Instead of using their expression in the right way, they might end up using it in the wrong way. So that evil intent is something which is potentially there in a Khalifa. That is what made them ask this question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem.